Anyway, it's a great song, and it's got echoes in it of, or rather, there's a song that my late brother-in-law Mike Waterson wrote that has echoes of this in it, because Mike Waterson, some of you will know, was the Watersons are from Hull, and Hull was a big fishing port. And when he was growing up and leaving school at the age of 15, so many of his classmates were saying, great, we're leaving school. Let's get out on the trawlers, get round the North Cape, get off Iceland and make a fortune, because you could. You know, these kids could make an absolute fortune. I mean, they broke all the rules and they made a fortune. And they would come back, and the first thing they would do is buy the spectacular fisher lads suits, which apparently were common all in fishing ports all around the country. And the Hull ones, I've seen drawings of the Hull ones, and they were amazing. Great long draped jacket with a half belt at the back, and a bell-bottom trousers with a split up the side, and they were embroidered. Some of them I was told, but other people say it's not true, had dozens of buttons sewed all the way down there and all the way down there. And they were done in sort of all colours, but the spectacular colours which the young fisher lads would choose, probably more often than most, were pink, sky blue and yellow. So you always knew there they were in the pub raising their pints. I'm a man. And the landlords would serve them, and the police turned a blind eye because they figured they've been round there, they deserve a pint or 12. And Mike had a sort of run-in's too strong a term. He just was bewildered by one of his old classmates coming back from one trip, standing there striking the I'm a man pose with his pipe. And he was wearing a single black glove. And Mike eventually sort of, all right, why the black glove? And he very theatrically put his pint down and peeled off the glove. And there were 3 of his fingers were black. And Mike just looked and said, what in the bloody hell is that? And he said, that's frostbite. To go green, they have to come off. He was very happy about it. Put the glove back on, resumed his pose. It was a sign of his manhood. Gulp. That's another reason for singing this. On the 23rd of March, me boys, we hoisted our topsail, crying heaven above protect us with the sweet and the pleasant gale. We never was downhearted, boys, nor let our courage fail, but we bore off up to Greenland, looking out for Greenland whale, looking out for Greenland whale. And when that we come to Greenland, where the icy winds do blow, we tacked about all in the north, all among the frost and snow. Our fingertips were frozen off, likewise were our toenails, as we crawled out all on the deck, looking out for Greenland whale, looking out for Greenland whale. And when that we come to Imes, where the mountains flowed with snow, we tacked about all in the north till we heard the whalefish blow. And when we catch that whale, my boys, homeward we will steer. We'll make those valleys ring aloud from the drinking of strong beer. We will make those lofty alehouses in London town to roar, And when the money is all gone, to Greenland go for more. Oh, to Greenland go for more. It's the Scarborough Fair. It's when talking about Davy inventing Dadgad, and we all pounced. Thing was that we were all rubbish in those days. The only one who wasn't rubbish really was Davy. But I'll say it again, that we were all basically rubbish. And whenever anybody got a good idea, everybody else jumped on it. Davy Graham wrote Angie, and it became important that every guitar player who thought they were worth anything you had to be able to play Angie. So we all played Angie. Then Bert Jansch came along and he did various things, and one of the things he did was a thing called Strolling Down the Highway. So everybody had to be able to play Strolling Down the Highway. And my good idea was Scarborough Fair, so everybody had to be able to play Scarborough Fair. And Paul Simon was in that mix. I had a big talk with him about it, and he said, we were all taking from each other, because we all had to improve. So we did, by taking what somebody else had figured out, and it really helped everybody. He said, then I was just about to give up, because Art Garfunkel came over, and he was very interesting, because he was very, he always seemed to me to be very lofty. He never connected, he walked around.
Was he tall?
Not that well, he was taller than Paul, but then everybody was.
Maybe that's why.
But he was really just he always seemed very disdainful. Maybe he was shy. But I met him very briefly once. He came over to London. And Paul said, when we had this big talk, about 98 sometime, and he said, Art Garfunkel, I said Artie, always called him Artie. Artie and I were just about to give up. We tried and tried and tried, and we were getting nowhere. Said, and we basically shook hands and said, oh, that's it. We've had a good time. Okay, ha 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 ha. And went back to New York, and their record producer had put a drum track on Sound of Silence, a drum track from another session, I believe, and it had gone straight to #1. So suddenly, from it being in a state of complete abject collapse, their career went woof, that. And he said, and from that moment, everything I did turned to gold. And one of the things was Scarborough Fair, which was used in The Graduate. And he said, when people said, wow, Scarborough Fair, where's that? He would name check me. And people would say, and journalists would say, Martin, who? And just, well, it doesn't, what? Oh, never mind, don't matter. And then ask him another question. So, and I believe him, because he's, I think the problem with, a few years ago, Bob Dylan did 2 traditional albums. And the first one, everything on it was credited to him. And the second one was very, very carefully name-checked. And I'm quite sure that what happened was the same sort of thing that happened to Paul. Whenever Paul did anything that was traditional, and if he would leave it to the suits to do the to do the research, to do the all the copyrights. And Paul's written a great song here. Parsley, sage, rosin, what? Thyme. Oh, it's a herb. Oh, it's an herb. Sorry, herb. So I mean, it's a blunder on their parts, both of them. And as I say, you know, Bob took a phenomenal amount of flack for that first traditional album because he'd learned all his, he had all these records. He had a Nick Jones album. He did Kennedy I.O. He had a couple of Paul Brady songs from that traditional album he did, Welcome Kind Stranger, which I still think is one of the best things that any of our generation ever did. Fabulous album, I think. Ooh.
Just on that subject, I mean, the...
Hold the question.
Yes.
Hold that thought. Paul Simon never made any money from Scarborough Fair. The money that was made from Scarborough Fair from that song was from the canticle which Art Garfunkel wrote. The person who I never made any money from it either, because a very slippery, cute publisher got all the money and ownership of Scarborough Fair. I've never received a royalty for Scarborough Fair. Neither has Paul. Bloke died a millionaire on a beach in South Africa. He's down there.
Right, on that lofty note, we'll move on to another question.
Lady, old gold, but the stone bids you come to Greenwood and ask the leave of none. The husband stood in the shadow, an angry man was he. I never knew the man lived, my love loved more than me. So he's gone down to her room, he dressed in her array. Like some woman he's gone down to find this young Billy. Young Billy sat in the greenwood, he whistled and he sang. Yonder come the woman that I have loved so long. For Billy run down and down there to meet her where she came. Oh, the sight that he saw, his heart grew still as stone. For Billy ran down and down there to help her from the horse. Oh, and oh, he cries out, woman was never so gross. The husband, he had a long knife, it hung down by his knee. He took the head of young Billy and off his fair body. And he's gone home and hung there, down into his hall. Tossed Billy's head to her, crying, lady, catch the ball. And she's taken up the head there, she kissed it cheek and chin. I love better this boy than all my kith and kin. And she's taken up the head there, she hugged it to her room. Once I was full of this boy as the plum is of the stone. For when I was in my dad's house in my virginity, a young man come to my room and we got young Billy. And I bore him in my room in secrecy and shame. I loved him in the greenwood, all out in wind and rain. And I will kiss his sweet head, I will kiss his chin. I will vow and stay true, and I'll never kiss man again. And up and spoke the husband, and how sad man was he. If I had known he was your son, he would not have been killed by me. If I had known he was your son, he would not have been killed by me.